Imagine this. You're 1 year into your role, maybe just two. You just had your first real strategy presentation, and on paper, it went fine. Nobody disagreed, people nodded, there were a couple of polite questions, and yet you walked away thinking they didn't really buy my story. I see this with the leaders that I coach all the time, and I'm sure you've been there as well. Let me tell you how bad this can get. One of my podcast guests ran an innovation team that built something genuinely great for a toy retailer. It was a magic wand, a real one that kids could borrow in the store with a chip inside, and kids would walk through the aisles, tap the toys that they wanted, and the wand would build their wish list for Christmas. They prototyped it, they tested it with real families, and it tested off the charts. The CEO loved it so much that he gave a speech about it and asked for it in 90% of the stores by Christmas. And then it died. The marketing director, the head of stores, the head of operations, and the CEO started arguing about who should pay for it and who would give up shelf space to make place for it. The best tested idea of the year, it was killed in one afternoon. When a great initiative dies like this, it's almost never the technology. It's more often than not politics. And politics isn't some dirty game that people are playing. It's just how people are. People are protecting their teams, their budgets, their name, and it's normal. And it's also predictable, which means that you can work with it. For me, it comes down to one simple line. Involve the right people early on, and you never have to sell your idea later on. So, 4 key thoughts. Done right, these 4 make getting your idea approved just a rubber stamp. And I'll give you an example at the end of how they could really work. The first step is very short, it takes 15 minutes. Grab a piece of paper and map your stakeholders. And before you sigh, I know, you've drawn a stakeholder map at some training and it ended up in a drawer. This isn't that. This version never goes into a deck and you don't have to show it to anyone. It's just for you. You update it as often as necessary and then throw it away when it's done and you no longer need it. 3 questions when you write people's names down. First, who has a real interest in this idea or what your team is working on? Second, who has direct or indirect influence over your budget and your decisions, the things that really affect you and your team. And then third, the questions that nobody asks at those trainings. Who has a say in how your performance is evaluated and who's in the room when they talk about your annual performance, your budget, your promotion? Write those names down. You'll end up with probably 8 to 12 people somewhere. Are there any stakeholders you missed that are not directly in your line, your org chart? Every organization has those people. The planning manager that everyone trusts, the person that knows everyone, hears everyone, talks to everyone. If they believe in your plan, the whole company suddenly hears about it. Put those on the list as well. Next, give every name a color. Green, they're positive about you, this idea, and your team. Orange, they're somewhere in the middle, not decided yet. Red, clearly negative. Or gray, they have no idea. Be honest with yourself when you fill this out. Most people tend to score stakeholders as a lot more positive than they really are. Now, look at the piece of paper. The 5 people with the most influence, especially the ones who aren't green yet, those 5 deserve most of your time and attention. The second step is the real work. Before you build your plan, before you go and do anything, before you build a deck, have anything to present, sit down with those people one-on-one and don't pitch your idea yet, just ask. Prepare the questions carefully. For example, if you ask a CFO who just sees IT as a cost center, and most of them do, what technology risks keep them up at night, he'll probably say he doesn't care because it's your job, conversation's over. He cares about finance and budget. So ask him, which number is the most challenging for you right now? And could I help move that with technology? Or what would it take for you to defend my budget to the board when I'm not in the room? Those are questions he can clearly answer. Ask the operations director about his numbers, production lines that keep breaking down, logistics issues, factories, and what success looks like for him in 6 months. Build your plan from their answers, not your own assumptions, their words. Because when you present a plan and people recognize their own words in your presentation, they're so much more likely to support them. They're not your audience anymore. They're co-authors of a plan. And as you build, keep sending drafts around, informally, one-on-one, and do it long before the final version is ready. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. What about the stakeholder that is actively working against you? The one who escalates over your head all the time? He's not going to open up in a quick meeting or over coffee. Don't start with them. Look at their numbers and start talking to their team, their people. Collect ideas. Then Ask support from one of your other more supportive influencers to bridge the gap, open a conversation, and make the introduction properly. Involve the right people early on, and you will never have to sell your idea later on. Third, in all of those conversations, and I said this already, speak their language. Don't talk about technology. Talk about money, talk about business outcomes. One of my guests told me a story. It was a security company with thousands of guards, and it built this really impressive cameras that had AI, and it could recognize suspicious behavior. They showed it to all of their clients in a big showroom, and everyone was really impressed. Who actually bought it? No one. Impressive, but that's not a business case. So they changed one thing. They would sit down with the clients and calculate in just 30 seconds what it meant for them and their budget. You're covered 100% of the time, not just whenever the guard happens to be walking by, and I'll guarantee you a 15% lower price over 3 years. Are you in? That's all. Of course. Here's the kind of rewrite that I mean. When you create a board slide, you could say, we added 3 new data sources and 5 reports to our data platform. Nobody cares. Or you could say, we cut payment failures by 8%, we saved 400K every year. The work is the exact same thing. The conversation, completely different. So here's the test for those 5 stakeholder conversations. If you can't explain your idea to your CFO or your CEO in 60 seconds in business terms, you're not ready yet. Do the homework first. And if you're thinking, I'm not a finance person, neither was I in the beginning. In the end, after years and years of doing finance, I ended up explaining to finance controllers how we allocated CapEx internationally in our own budget. All of it is learnable if you take enough time for it. And fourth, this is not a one-off exercise. You can't build support in a single meeting when you need it. Stakeholder relations are everything when it comes to your success. So this is not a one-time exercise you do before a big presentation. It has to be a regular rhythm. The best IT leaders that I've worked with spend a third of their time, a third of their week outside their own team. They spend it with their business, with their key stakeholders, and with their peers. I know how this sounds. A third of the week, 16 hours plus next to operations and incidents and compliance audit, but it's why their projects get funded and others get questioned. Can't do a third? Maybe start lower. 8 to 10 names, 30 minutes to an hour each, every 1 to 2 months. That's 4 to 5 hours a month. I say do more, but that is the bare minimum. You have your stakeholder map. Build the rhythm. Who needs what information, when, and what shape or form? Is it an email? Is it a deck? Is it a meeting? The CFO gets his numbers monthly, of course. The operations director gets a heads up before any major change that touches his factories. Nobody on that map should ever be surprised by anything that you or your team do. By the way, in the priorities video just before this, I told you to share your priorities with your stakeholders, including what's not on the list right now. This stakeholder relationship is exactly what makes those messages work. The video is right before this one. Go watch it and subscribe so you don't miss the rest. And what does all of this get you? A guest on my podcast said it better than I ever could. Plenty of people tell you what time it is. You need people who will fix the clock without you asking. That's what real buy-in looks like. Stakeholders who don't just approve your plan. Stakeholders who will defend it, especially in meetings where you're not there. So, 4 moves. Map the stakeholders who really matter on a piece of paper. Make them co-authors, not an audience. Always speak in business terms. And keep going every month, long before you need anything from them. I know this works. Let me give an example. Years ago, I was in an investment committee and I was asking for a large investment, 7 figures. In that same meeting, our COO had a much smaller request on the table. It was under 500K. He got a lot of questions, detail after detail after detail. Then my request came up, 7 figures. Not a single question. I just did a quick walkthrough. Nobody had any questions because everyone already knew what I was asking for and why, long before the meeting ever took place. It was by far the biggest request of that committee, and it was exactly what I promised you at the start. It was just a rubber stamp. Of course they got approved. That's the opposite of the meeting that we started this video with. Same meeting, same nodding, opposite meeting. The decision is not where you pitch. It's just the final confirmation. If you involve the right people early on, there is nothing left to sell. So this week, just do one thing. Draw that map. 15 minutes, 8 to 12 names, and be honest with the colors. Then book a short meeting, talk about their topic, and pick the most influential person who isn't green yet. And tell me in the comments, who's the stakeholder you've been avoiding? There's one thing in this series hasn't covered yet, leading the change yourself. Be out in front. That's the final video of this summer series on making the shift from doing the work, being that operational leader, to leading strategically. Subscribe, and follow along for the rest of the videos.